Good evening, everyone. Delighted to be with you tonight and to share some insights, hopefully into LinkedIn. Just a little bit about me. I live in Haxby in York. I have worked for myself for the last 20 years. I've got a background in human resources. So prior to going self-employed, I worked in the rail industry and the chemical industry at ICI on Teesside. And then in 2000, I set my own business up. So early part of that was interim, mostly interim and consultancy. But I've always had a passion for coaching. I love the sort of the sort of one-to-one and the group coaching. So last sort of 5 or 6 years, the majority of my work has been in the coaching space. I work as an associate for an organisation called Penna, which is actually now called LHH Penna, and that's where I met Fiona a few years back now. I also am a coach for a Manchester-based networking organisation called In Touch. They're a membership organisation, but I'm also a coach for them, as well as having worked myself. So I've used LinkedIn for a while. I wouldn't necessarily say I know everything about it, but I use it as a tool to connect with people, but also to develop my own business. So what I'm going to share with you today is some insights that I have around LinkedIn and how you can think about using LinkedIn to develop your network, and also to get found, and also to get more work, I guess, which all of us will heartily want. So before I kick in with a couple of sort of slides that give a bit more context to LinkedIn, just to come up with a very rudimentary poll, just to get an idea from you about where you currently sit with regard to LinkedIn. So Steve, if you wouldn't mind, please, just sharing that. So 0 to 2, if you class yourself as 0 to 2, you're pretty new to LinkedIn, got a very basic profile and not much more. If you class yourself as 3 to 5, you use LinkedIn on a fairly regular basis, got a reasonable number of connections and perhaps a member of a group. And if you class yourself as 5 plus, you're looking for some best practice hints and tips. As I mentioned, just 2 or 3 slides really, just to give you some context behind LinkedIn. And these are some of the ways that people use LinkedIn. And I think for us as coaches, probably putting one of the main things first, which is around building and controlling your brand. So I'm actually doing quite a bit of work on my own brand as a coach at the moment, really. So I'm happy to share sort of thoughts that I've got on that. But what I want to, what's really important is how do we show ourselves on LinkedIn? When people look at us on LinkedIn, what do we want them to notice about us? It's a bit like there was a horrible survey around CVs, where the average time that someone looks at a CV is 7 seconds, which is horrible, really, considering the amount of time people take on their CVs. Likewise with LinkedIn, it perhaps isn't 7 seconds, but it isn't a huge amount of time. So what do people see, or what do we want people to see when they look at us on LinkedIn? And I'll give you some sort of examples from my own profile, and happy to hear your own thoughts on that as well. Clearly, LinkedIn is there for us to network. LinkedIn is the biggest networking site in the world. It allows us to connect with people, and it allows us to reconnect. So over the years, I've worked in, probably like a lot of us, I've worked in a range of different companies, and it's allowed me to reconnect with people. Even if that doesn't lead to any sort of work or anything like that, it's just great to share memories, share happy thoughts of people that I used to work with a number of years ago. So LinkedIn has been fantastic for me, just to connect with people who I worked with prior to the internet. So and that's been great.
Yeah. So questions thus far are on premium. I think you're going to address that anyway.
Yeah.
Sean asks, his LinkedIn profile is geared towards his day job because he's only a part-time coach. Okay. Though I'm sure he's full-time when he's doing it, aren't you there, Sean? Margaret mentioned premium, but from the recruiter's point of view, it's useful. Yeah. Kate is interested in a second profile.
Okay.
And Justine is, how do you manage requests from people you don't know? A frequent occurrence. There is, of course, the delete or I don't know this, ignore, isn't it? Yes, but I think that is a really useful one.
Yeah.
From all sorts of weird and I'm sure we all get all sorts of weird and wonderful things from around the world on that.
Yeah, there seems to be a huge number of people who have got the magic panacea for coaching and want to sell to us as coaches what that magic panacea is. I get a request to connect probably every few days from a different person in that space. Mm-hmm. That makes it quite interesting.
Well, LinkedIn events is another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, from Margaret. Yeah.
Okay.
And Kate has just said she presses ignore if there are these spam, really, I suppose.
Yeah. So yeah, that's right. Great stuff. I've made a note of those, Steve. Thanks. I'll make sure I try and weave them in as I go through it. And obviously, anything else that arises as I'm talking, please feel free to continue to ask the questions. So it's what LinkedIn's developed into. The third sort of point there is about sharing and gathering knowledge and information. A few years ago, I used Twitter a lot, and I use Twitter. I know people use it for different things. I used it more in the information space, and I found over the last few years, especially, that that LinkedIn gives me, just in terms of the information that I'm looking for, gives me pretty much all the information that I need. So I don't use Twitter as much now. And interestingly, you may be aware that LinkedIn is now owned by Microsoft. Mm-hmm. So as a company stroke as a product, the sharing of information, and especially the increase in the amount of company information that's on there has increased massively. So the knowledge and information is a really important thing. And certainly around finding and advertising opportunities. Margaret, I think the question was around the recruiter's premium. The recruiter's premium is where a lot of companies make their money. In terms of LinkedIn makes its money from those companies because the recruiter's premium is quite hefty. And the interesting thing is that when I'm coaching people who are active in the job market, it's pretty much as a given that the 90% of the recruiters that are out there use LinkedIn as a way of finding candidates. So if one is active in the job market, having a LinkedIn profile comes a very, very close second to having a really good CV, because it is the public space where people will find you in a business context. So how big is LinkedIn? The answer is very big. 8 million company pages, 2 million groups, 300,000 discussions starting in groups every day, and a little bit more about the sort of information now. There's a whole raft of different sort of news channels that are in place. You've got an ability to follow influencers, the usual suspects within that. And if you're in a more niche area, you can follow the sort of more niche influencers as well. And as I think, as well as Margaret mentioned as well, something that's relatively recent is the LinkedIn events, where you've got the facility now to actually enroll into various different webinars that are going on through the LinkedIn site. So I think that's I say it's relatively new. I've not noticed. I've only recently noticed it. So the information that LinkedIn provides for us as business people and as coaches, I think is fantastic and is increasing as the sort of each week goes on. How does it work? I'm guessing most of you will probably know this already, but as soon as I register on the LinkedIn site, I can be found, even though I might not at this stage have any connections. So if I were to connect with Steve and he accepts, then Steve becomes a first line connection of mine. And as soon as Steve becomes a first line connection, then all of Steve's first line connections become my second line connections. So I don't need to do anything at all to have second line connections. I have second line connections by virtue of the first level of connections that I have already. So it's very, very easy numerically even if you were to have 50 connections, if each of those connections were to have 100 connections of their own, you've got 5,000 people in a relatively immediate network. And when I come on later, just to talk about how you can use LinkedIn proactively, the second line connections can become very, very useful. You'll also notice on the diagram here, you've got third degree connections. So if Steve's connected to Fiona, and Fiona's connected to another person, I am a third line connection to that person. In terms of the usefulness of that, the third line connections for most of us aren't that great, because we've got to go through two people to actually get there. So a lot of the productive work is done, and lots of the better relationships are found within the first 2 degrees of connectivity. So that's how, when the guy set it up, that's how I actually set the site up, with 3 degrees of connectivity, if you like. So in terms of what makes up a LinkedIn profile, I'll take you through each aspect of this when I go live on the site in a few minutes. You have a headline that has a professional summary underneath it. You have a summary statement, or a bio, or what they call now the about section. You can add in skills to you, and you can add up to 50 skills, and people can endorse you for those. I'll talk about the relative merits of endorsements. You can talk about your experience, the closest section to your CV, if you like, on LinkedIn. You can talk about education, courses and certification that you may have. You can talk about your interests. And an area that I find quite helpful, have found quite helpful, is recommendations. So this is where you can get third-party people to recommend the work that you've done. If you think about your role as a coach, it's great to have that third-party endorsement, because it's actually quite, certainly, especially for people in the job market, most job references now are factual. So getting that qualitative information about us as coaches can be really helpful. Yes, you do. Yeah. So LION is an acronym that stands for LinkedIn Open Networker. So basically, anyone with LION next to their profile name is someone that will connect with anyone. I know one of the questions from earlier was, what do I do about connecting with other people? And people have different views. Some people say there's no such thing as a bad connection, and they're more likely to be in LION territory. Other people at the opposite extreme would say, I'll only connect with people that I know really well. And most people, as you would expect, sit somewhere in between that.
So do you just decide for yourself that you're an open networker and just put
Yes,
that in your profile?
Yeah, you can put it in your profile if you wanted to. Yeah.
It's not something that LinkedIn have, like, it's not a feature of the system. It's just you saying, I'll talk to anybody.
I think it might be a feature of the system, because you do see it. You do see it a fair bit from that perspective, Justine. But yeah, I think I'm not sure, never having been a LION in that context myself, what are the ramifications of it. But it's somebody that's sort of very, very keen on networking, recognising from their perspective that, as I say, there's no such thing as a bad connection. So come and talk to me, come and connect with me, because I might be able to help you, and you might be able to help me. It's that sort of mentality, which some people do have. Like a lot of people, I sit somewhere in the middle. I don't necessarily like to be sold to. Like I mentioned earlier about a lot of these people now that want to sell coaching systems to people. I don't like that approach, if I'm honest. But I'm more keen to connect with a greater number of people, because sometimes you never know. And when I think about the work that I've got through LinkedIn, probably like a lot of people, the vast majority of the work has come from people who are closer connected to me. Mm-hmm. I've had 3 or 4 pieces of work that have come to me from the more speculative end, if you like. So I searched for a coach in York that had a background in this particular industry. You're one of the people that came up, and I wasn't connected with that person at all. So some of the speculative stuff can happen, but I guess, like in any network, the strength of the network is the strength of the relationship. And that's where, for me personally, and I know for a lot of people in the same, it's that strength of network that most often pays dividends. Yeah, of course. So the second profile, first of all, technically, yes, it is possible to do that. So you can have a number of people often have two profiles, but it's more by error rather than by design. So that I set one up 15 years ago, I think, and then they come set another one up, and they've forgotten they'd set one up. I'm working with one guy at the moment who's got three profiles, and is fairly absent-minded. Yeah, it does allow it, Kate. It does allow you to have two profiles. My sense is, though, with it, is that it can confuse people. Mm-hmm. So I worked with someone that she was a business analyst, and she was also a piano teacher. And she asked me the question in one of the courses that I ran, can I have a profile for a piano teacher and a profile for business analyst? The answer is yes, you can, but it's going to confuse the heck out of your audience. Mm-hmm. And probably LinkedIn isn't the place to go to if you're looking for a piano teacher anyway. So technically, yes, it is. My sense is, and this probably addresses sort of Sean's question. It's almost, what is it that you want to use LinkedIn for? I think is a question to ask yourself. And when I work with people who have got different parts to their business, if you like, that can be quite different, I often think, is LinkedIn the best vehicle to use for this particular aspect of what you want to do? If you do feel as though you want to have them on the same profile, it's important to be explicit early on in your profile about that. So in the about section, you might want to put something specific about your emerging sort of role as a coach. But it's got to be mindful. You've got to be mindful, I guess, Sean, that if you're looking for people to find you as a coach on LinkedIn, and they see you on LinkedIn as someone in a permanent full-time role, what are the sorts of ramifications for you, and how would you sort of mitigate that, if that mm-hmm. sort of makes sense?
Yeah. So
yeah, and Margaret, very good point there. You can have a business page as well, so you can go ahead and set that up. So if you've got your own coaching business, which I guess the majority of us have, then you can use the business page to actually set that up. So that gives you, that's a really good point, actually. Thanks. That does give you another option. Go very quickly through what does a good profile look like? What are the things you need to consider? And then think about how you can use LinkedIn proactively. So I'll spend about 10 minutes or so on each one of those. So in terms of the profile itself, in earlier I used the term brand. So as I say, I've been thinking long and hard about my own brand, and I'm never very happy with what I put on LinkedIn with regards to my brands. And some of the coaching that I'm getting myself at the moment is thinking about becoming a lot more niche than I have been in the past. So as a career coach, which is primarily what I am, I can work with most people in most sectors. And interestingly, the sort of feedback that I've had from my own coach is to say, that might be true, Rob, but actually that's not good enough for the people that a lot of people that are out there. So as you can see in my headline now, which is the first bit that you read about me, this is what I put. So I put a sentence about helping professionals get market ready for roles within finance, and insurance and transport. Can I work outside of those sectors? Absolutely, yes. But this is how I'm pitching myself. And then the areas that I focus on, which is around branding, career coaching, CV, transition coaching, LinkedIn, and interviews. And I'll put a bit of a come and talk to me there in terms of 30-minute free consultation. So you've got quite a lot of space, as you can see in mine there. You've got quite a lot of space for making comments, putting a little bit of narrative in there. LinkedIn does work off keywords, as you would expect. So having keywords in there can also help you to be found a little bit more often. A relatively new thing, last sort of 3 to 6 months, LinkedIn's put in here something called Open to Work. And it says here, what are you open to work to do? And then you can either make it visible to, I've got only recruiters, I probably need to change that, or to the whole of your network. So that if you are open for work, even if it's just people like Sean who have a day job, so to speak, as well as this, there's nothing wrong in putting something about that within it. The about section is something, a bit of a flavour of you as a person. So what is distinctive about you? And that's what I've tried to do in that. It's a bit like writing your own CV. It always sounds a bit cheesy, or it seems a bit cheesy when you're reading it out. But that's how I've tried to make it a little bit distinctive. So the about section is important. I mentioned about the sort of 7 seconds for CVs. Probably for LinkedIn, you're talking about no more than about 1 to 2 minutes before people are going to make a decision around whether they want to continue any form of conversation with you or not. So within that 1 to 2 minutes, it'll be the headline. Having a smiley photograph, I've got a bit more hair there. Having a smiley photograph can be helpful. Holiday snaps aren't great. It's a business site, so having a smiley sort of business sort of persona is no bad thing. So in that minute, people are likely to look at this, look at the about section, and then probably a little bit further down, look at recommendations. I'll talk about recommendations in a bit more detail in a bit. So that's pretty much the main, in terms of your own profile, in terms of being found. They're some of the things that I'd really strongly encourage you to focus on. Think about that real first impression that you want people to have about you, in terms of the brand that you have and the service that you provide. On the dashboard, so you can see there, it says private to me. So who's viewed my profile? I'm starting to post a little bit more on LinkedIn now, so I'm hoping that number's going to go up, and also how many times I've appeared in searches. Experience sort of correlates to CV. So again, think about, even though I work with a number of different organisations at the moment, but back in the day when I had a proper job, even going back to the sort of my time at ICI and things, it's actually thinking about what were the things that I did then, even though it's a number of years ago, that's actually relevant to what I'm wanting to do now. So anything that in your career history that sort of resonates with your intentions is important, rather than just putting things that you did then that actually may not have too much relevance to what you want to do next. So that's the experience bit. Education can be useful in terms of connectivity. Skills, you can add up to 50 skills on LinkedIn, which is quite a high number. And the skills section can be helpful for you to get found. So if you go in to add a skill, basically it works on a keyword system. So if I start to type in the word career, you can see it comes up with a broad range of things just around career stuff. You can type in your own stuff, but it's unlikely. So you can say, I am good at career coaching. The chances of somebody wanting to search on, I am good at career coaching, probably pretty limited. So on the whole, I would encourage you to stick with the words that are there in that sense. So you can add up to 50. 50 might sound like a big number, and people have said, oh, well, you can never have 50 skills, or whatever, you can't be good at 50 things. It's less about that. It's more about being found. So I would encourage you to fill your boots, as far as those are concerned, with those key areas that you most want to focus on in your own business. You'll notice that on some of your profiles, you'll have endorsements next to them. And endorsements is like a thumbs up. So if I think Steve's good at management consulting, I can endorse Steve for that, and it's a thumbs up. Being brutally honest and talking to quite a few people, recruiters, etc., they don't pay too much notice to endorsements. And I've actually found in the past that people have endorsed me for things that I don't necessarily want to be endorsed for. So I've taken control back of my skills. So even if you wanted to, you couldn't endorse me for stuff.
Oh.
No, Jane. Having said that, with endorsements, what I do like are recommendations. And for those of you who haven't explored this, I really would encourage you to do it. Getting third-party information about you is really important. And people will give recommendations off their own bat, which is fantastic. But often, especially if I'm working with someone as a coach, like a nudge, I've been working with him for over a year now. I asked him, coming to the end of the relationship, to actually recommend me. And what I always like to do is to ask people, to tell people why I want them to recommend me and in what areas. So sometimes when people recommend you, the testimonial that they give can be quite generic. My encouragement to you is try and make it specific as you possibly can to what you want to focus on. Then I know it is slightly contrived, because obviously you're asking people who are going to say nice things about you. But having said that, it's great. People, we're quite nosy. Well, I know I am. And if I'm looking at people's profiles, we'll often look at what other people have said about them. So think about that. Think about that in your own context, and think about who will be the best people to recommend you. What do you want to be recommended for? And all you would need to do is go onto their profile. So, for example, if I were to go on Mark Wilson's, a guy that I'm coaching at the moment, if I were to go onto his profile and click on more, I could go into request a recommendation. So that's the mechanics of how I would go and do that. Sometimes a recommendation comes out of the blue by the individual. Other times you can request it either clearly as possible for you. You'll see all sorts of other stuff on here about unfollowing, removing connections, reporting and blocking. So it does give you a fair bit of flexibility in terms of how do you want to manage that relationship with someone that you're connected with. So that's a very sort of brief whistle stop through your profile. I think I paid it for 12 months, and I paid about £250, something like that. So not a huge amount in the grand scheme of things. What I like about it, like Sean, is what's called LinkedIn Learning. So LinkedIn Learning is fab. It covers a whole variety of different things, from the more technical things like PowerPoint, Excel, all those sorts of things, to more sort of customer type stuff. There's loads of really good stuff on personal branding. I'm starting to use Canva at the moment, which is a tool where you can use sort of smart presentations and things like that. And I really do find LinkedIn Learning really helpful as a learning tool. It's absolutely fab. The other thing I like about Premium, and this is more for me as a career coach, is the actual job insights. So if I were to click on jobs, and if I were to go to one of the roles here, as a premium user of LinkedIn, it's a tad slow. So as a premium user of LinkedIn, you can see here there's a premium little sign next to it, and it says how many applicants have applied for the role. And then what it does is it compares my skills to what the skills are that are required in that particular role. So when I'm working with clients and they're active in the job market, I use their LinkedIn profile currently and compare it with the types of roles that they're applying for, and actually say, have you got some of the right skills in your particular in your section? Because it seems like, for me, I've only got 3 out of the top 10. Not that I necessarily would apply for this role, but I'm not going to be a good candidate for this because I've only got 3 out of 10. Also, it tells me as a premium user the seniority level, the education level, where the applicants are coming from. It gives me more insight into Kinsella Legal Limited as a company. So for me, not necessarily for myself, but for me as a career coach, lifting a sort of wider lid on the role that's being advertised can be really helpful for that. Outside of that, I'm not overly sure about the value of premium, if I'm honest. I think one of the comments in the chat was around creating a business page, and yeah, Margaret was right. You can create a business page without being a premium user. The only other thing which can be helpful is if you can search on LinkedIn for people that have looked at your profile, and if you use LinkedIn as a freebie user, you can only see the last 5 people that have looked at your profile. Whereas for me as a premium user, I can see everyone that's looked at my profile over the last 90 days. So for me, if I'm not going on to LinkedIn every day, it can be really helpful to find out people, from weeks ago perhaps, that have been looking at my profile.
Yeah, with the emails, if you can't message people outside of your network, but sometimes you might come across somebody that on a comment from another post, and they look interesting to you for whatever reason. So you can use that to get in touch with them. It's another way that you can use to expand your network in a kind of a more proactive way, shall we say?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point, Sean. And if you wanted to use LinkedIn in a more overt sales sort of way, the in-mail facility can be really helpful in terms of promoting a particular service or product that you've got. The in-mail facility can be really helpful in that space. Yeah, if you go onto their profile and then go onto their contact information, a lot of people actually keep their email address on there. So that's a bit of a crafty way of going about it if you did want to reach out to the individual. Or you could still connect with them anyway, but give them a reason to connect. And this comes back to a question from earlier, where it's what you do with people that you don't want to connect with. Exactly like Steve said, you can ignore them. Another thing you can do though is report them as spam. That's the other option that you have. And I don't know whether this has changed, but I know if you or I had been reported for spam on, I think it was 3 or 4 occasions, LinkedIn reserved the right to actually withdraw your sort of use of the site, because basically they don't, it's a sales tool clearly in lots of respects, but they don't want the sort of cold calling approach that some people try to adopt. So if there is someone that you want to reach out to, use that contact information if you can get hold of it, or find other ways if you know they work for a particular company, there might be an email protocol for that company that you might want to use. There are various ways around it. If you're somebody I really want to talk to, I'll find a good reason. Really, I'll find some sort of common ground where hopefully they won't just report me as spam. They might actually find some interest in what I feel that I have to offer. And sorry, Justine, to answer your question there, you get 1 month free, and then I think it's about 23 for the one that I use. The sort of the screen that I shared with you. It's about sort of £23-ish per month, and the usual thing. I paid for a year, and you got X number of months free. So take a view for me. For me, it's useful with my career clients. There are, like Sean, I would probably pay for it for the actual LinkedIn Learning, if I'm honest. I'd see enough value in that by itself, but clearly your money, your decision. So then in the last sort of few minutes, I just wanted to do the second part around how you can best reach out. So you'll have a number of people in your network currently, and with those people, you've got the facility to reach out to them, to message them at any time for those people who are in your first line connections. And some of the online events that we talked about a little bit earlier. What LinkedIn does is it makes a guess based on organisations you're involved with, or the university that you may have gone to, or people with similar jobs, on people you might know. So this is something I look at 2 or 3 times a week, because there's somebody joining LinkedIn every couple of seconds anyway, so you never know who might come up from that point of view. But what I found that's quite useful fairly recently is going back to your brand and thinking about, within your own coaching business, who is your target audience. I found a really good way, and some of you may know this already, which is fab, around narrowing that down. So one of the things you can do is, if you just did a search, so let's say you were interested in coaching directors. So if I just put director in the search bar at the top there, and then click on people, it gives me 37 million people, which is clearly a very large number. But if I then go into all filters, what it then allows me to do is to filter the type of directors that I might be interested in coaching. And as you can see here, I might want to say, right, I'm only interested in first line or second line connections. I'm only interested in people that are based in England. I'm only interested in people who work in financial services. And then if I apply all of those to my search, and again, this is a free thing, you don't have to be, I'm still got a very large number here, but you can see, so I've got 15,000 connections who have got the title of director who are working in financial services. Clearly that number's way too big, but hopefully you can see the principle of this, where I can start to narrow down my target base a little bit further. So if it was for Usman, for argument's sake, I've got one linked connection. So for me to reach out to Usman, could I reach out to him directly? Yeah, I could. He might think I'm trying to spam him though. So what I would want to do is either find a good reason for connecting with him or go via my link person. So I know Joanne reasonably well. So she knows bits about me as a coach, and I would hope that she'd want to promote me as a coach. What I don't know at this stage, though, is how well she knows Usman. So I'll go to Joanne and say, how well do you know Usman? If she knows him really well, it lays the potential foundation for her to introduce me to Usman as a potential client. And for a number of people that I've worked with actively in the job market, their ability to reach out with their network is massively important. And I think for us as coaches, there are a lot of us who are coaches, really. So thinking about what's distinctive about us and how we can best leverage our network to get work, because it is about who you know largely, and this is one way that you can do that.
I think one point to mention is that you get more facilities for search if you're on premium than on the freebie. You only get a limited number on the freebie.
That's right. LinkedIn after a while sort of stops you and says, yeah, that's enough, Rob. Actually, have you thought about upgrading to be able to do that? And just one final thing for me, and then I'm obviously very happy to take questions, is the use of hashtags. So again, some of you may do this already, but for example, if I were to put in the top here, hashtag coaching, what it will do is it will pick up, if it's a valid hashtag. Oh no, sorry, I've gone on to people here, just 2 seconds, sorry. Be with you just now. There is a hashtag coaching. You can see it's got 120,000 followers, and what it does, what you would expect it to do. So anytime anyone mentions hashtag coaching in any form on LinkedIn, then it will give you the link to it. So what I often do, and thinking about my own sort of target market moving forwards, I'll often use the hashtag to think about material that some people have actually added, articles, etc., just to reinforce the brand of who I am as a coach. So just something I found quite useful myself over the last 3 or 4 months is more proactively using the hashtag on the site to be able to do that.
Yeah, thank you. I was just I couldn't quite understand what you were saying about the hashtag piece. Are you suggesting that you use that to find content to reshare as part of your branding?
I would, yeah, and that sort of ties in, Sean, with the comment that Fee's just made regarding regularly posting on LinkedIn. LinkedIn changes the algorithm in terms of what's prominent on a very, very regular basis, and you can pay an arm and a leg to try and get insights into that. The most recent information that I've got is it's better to post than not to post, but it's not good to post too much. So
that may answer Fiona's point of regularly posting on LinkedIn.
So for someone that I'm working with currently that posts a heck of a lot, what she finds is if she posts more than a couple of times per day, she finds that the third, fourth post onwards very rarely gets any traffic. What she finds is posting 1 or 2 times a day. And interestingly, what she said is posting early in the morning and then reposting in the afternoon actually has gained quite a bit of traction for her. But it isn't about bombarding LinkedIn with all sorts of different posts. And think carefully about the content of the posts that you're sharing. I know some of you may write blogs. I don't know whether I'm sort of brave enough or intelligent enough to do that sort of thing, but it's something that again can help people to gain a sort of following. And it's interesting. I know Steve and I were talking before everyone came online, and what I'm learning myself is, and I'm getting my website revamped at the moment, is actually using LinkedIn as a vehicle to actually push people to my website where they might find out some more information. So essentially what this person's sort of recommending to me is that start to develop your content incrementally, start to establish a niche in the areas that you want to establish them in, and then actually think about pushing that traffic, if you like, to your website, and then using your website to get people's email addresses. I don't mean that to sound overly mercenary, but it's so you can have a better, more one-to-one relationship with someone through email. So what I'm planning to do, because I'm concentrating on 2 or 3 sectors, I'm going to be putting out some hints and tips around managing your career, but also hints and industry insights into the areas that I'm going to be working in. So hopefully the people that will end up sort of having, getting access to my newsletter will be those people that will value it. And obviously the intention for me is that they either come and buy services from me themselves, or they recommend me to others. So that's the sort of process that I'm looking to follow, and I'll keep you posted. If it doesn't work, we might have a LinkedIn Mark II in a few months' time. But if it does work, I'm very, very happy to share my thoughts and successes with you. So hopefully we can all share in those sorts of things.
So does that answer your question, Fiona?
Thank you. So yeah, I'm conscious of the time, Steve, and it has been a bit of a whistle-stop tour through LinkedIn. I think I've managed to answer most of the questions that people have got. I think a couple of you have asked to connect with me anyway, and that's absolutely fine. And if you wanted just to get in touch and have a bit of time with me around LinkedIn, very, very happy to talk to you separately. I like LinkedIn. I found it useful in terms of generating work. I found it useful in terms of upskilling myself and increasing my knowledge, and I've just found it really useful just to keep in touch with people, in a non-Facebook sort of way. So for me, I'm quite a big fan of it for a number of positive reasons.
Yeah, you might have seen I've been onto your profile. I will ask to connect with you actually, but the thing I mentioned earlier called Crystal Knows, you're probably really interested in this, and actually I'd recommend to everybody that you Google it. I've got a free LinkedIn account, but you can actually get a disc profile. I've actually just downloaded your disc profile, Rob.
All right, okay.
And what it is, it's a really scary thing actually. It pulls together all the information about a person that it finds on LinkedIn and other websites about people, and it puts it together in a profile. Now, a person might have actually completed the disc profile in LinkedIn. If they have, that helps. But if not, so this document I've got now tells me how to approach you on a sales pitch, how to approach you on email, on a meeting. I'll send it to you so you can see it. I'll send it to you privately. And actually, I'm not saying it's totally accurate, because one that I first done, and you only get so many free, you get about 5 free, and then I think they add another 1 or 2 in as little tasters every couple of months. I did one on somebody I was going to meet with some potential business, and he did say to me he likes to get really to the point, he likes to get to the nitty-gritty really quickly. So I went in prepared thinking, right, this quick meeting. 2.5 hours later I was still sat with him. Actually, I could see looking back, it was because he was really interested and it was real detail he wanted to know, and he didn't want to waffle, he just wanted to get to the detail of stuff. So it's might be worth you looking at it, it's useful. And so if you are going to meet with somebody and you just want a bit more of an insight, maybe just, you know, taking it with a bit of pinch of salt, but it's sometimes useful because it only gives you what people have put out there on sites.
Okay.
Could be frightening.
Thank you for that, Mark. That's really interesting. Thanks. I'm going to give that a. I use Disc. I use Disc with the.
If you actually look at somebody's profile on LinkedIn, there's a little thing on the right hand side that says view profile, but it's only there if you go through Chrome. It's not there if you go through Safari or Firefox or anything.
Right, okay. I use Chrome, so that's really cool. Thank you.
Okay, I think time now to say thanks to you as participants, but a special thanks to you, Rob, for all your help.
Lovely to
Yeah.
share.